Evening all. I thought we could carry on looking at the 1966 Olympiad because last week I really enjoyed, and I think many of you enjoyed, looking at Tal's games with white. But what about with black in that Havana Olympiad of 1966? So let's have a look at his game versus the Cuban first, Cobo Arteaga Eldis. So we're going to flip the board to see from Tal's perspective. The first move was d4, and I hope the board's okay everywhere, on stream as well. Okay, so d4, and Tal here played knight f6. Okay, and after c4, it looks as though he's going to play the Nimzo Indian. If white plays knight c3, it looks as though he might pounce for bishop b4, but white plays knight f3. And now dynamic pawn structure is headed to with c5 actually. c5. After knight c3, c takes d4. Okay, knight takes d4, and now the pin bishop b4 is played, and white unpins now with bishop d2, which of course interrupts white's protection of d4 here. And now black challenges that d4 knight immediately with knight c6. So after knight c2, actually now the bishop is attacked. If you press play, sorry, someone's saying if you press play. Okay, so here the bishop being attacked, it doesn't want to take on c3 necessarily. It actually goes to c5. So bishop c5. And okay, white plays e3. And now black Tal tries to extend the scope of his bishop. If white ever takes here, then this bishop's got scope. White ignored that, played bishop e2, and now both sides castled. Okay, now we see the move a6, and it looks as though maybe, you know, black's intending d takes after bishop takes to play b5 and bishop b7. That might be the intention here, but white seals down b5. He plays a4. Okay, queen e7, which looks logical. Queen e1, an interesting move by white. Queen e1. Okay, it takes the queen away for that d file. You see rook d8 and rook d1. Okay, now Tal takes on c4. After bishop takes c4, he's still got this problem bishop. How does he resolve this issue in this position? Well, he plays actually bishop d7. Maybe the bishop can just slip down to e8, and black can try and use things like the b4 square, the c file, maybe. Okay, so bishop c1, and he does play rook ac8. Queen e2, as if white's wasting a bit of time with the queen. It looks like passive play. The Cuban team might not have been the strongest team in the Olympiad, in this 1966 Olympiad. I'm not entirely sure of the FIDE rating of Cobo Arteaga here, but okay, so bishop a7, but Tal's FIDE was definitely around 26-20 at the time of this game. Was that 1972? No, I think this was pre-FIDE ratings actually. In the next Olympiad that Tal played in 1972, we see a FIDE rating of about 26-30. But in this one, I don't have rating data. It's but pre-FIDE rating system. So anyway, e4, and now we see knight e5 hitting that bishop on c4. Bishop b3. Bishop c6. Okay, the bishop is sorted out. It's got pressure now on e4. Both bishops are very nice now. Black's solved a lot of problems already. In fact, there's dark square weaknesses to play on as well pretty soon. Bishop g5, and the bishop's kicked. After bishop h4, kicked again with knight g6. And now we see intensification on the dark squares with queen c5. So what's this queen doing here? Maybe the one idea is queen g5 might become possible. Okay, or b5 on this c file. That there's pressure might be on the c file. Okay, we see after king h1 the move knight h5, and it's already showing that okay, the queen is actually supporting c5, so that's another point. Just play this move to take on g3, and you can imagine this is quite dangerous, this diagonal potentially. Okay, so knight e3 and f4 can be used. A knight slips into f4 now, attacking the queen. White takes queen g4, and now bishop b8. This diagonal is also useful for the bishop, pointing at h2. Okay, and white might be thinking, hang on, isn't there a tactic here on e6 at some point? If this knight moved away, could there be a tactic on e6? Okay, so g3 kicking the knight, and okay, actually Tal plays now knight d3, and I think his opponent got quite excited here by this prospect of bishop e6, because you know the queen is going to be on c8 here, and of course this might be a big problem for black. But let's see, bishop takes e6 is played, and it turns out to be not that great. So after f takes, we see rook takes d3, trying to weaken c8 for this queen e6 tactic. Unfortunately, okay, after there's a sting in the end of the towel here for white. After rook takes d3, queen takes e6 check. Tal plays king h7, avoiding queen takes c8 being check. And unfortunately, after queen takes c8, can you spot black's next move? If I give you 15 seconds, please hide the score sheet if on the Play Chess server. If you go to the openings book instead, not to have the score sheet, we can play these guess the move games. Okay, unfortunately there's a bit of a sting in the tail here. I hope you can all see it. So in the tail end of the combination, I think it was from Fisher's Memorable Games book. There was a quotation about sting at the end of the tail, so I got it from there. Started using it myself. But here the sting is bishop takes e4 check, and you know, winning the queen, white resigned here. Bishop takes e4, winning. White had to resign. So I don't know. It's Tal systematically got a very good position. So let's see that again. So what happened here? He had some central occupation. He sorted out his queen's bishop. On this diagonal, it turns out that bishop's rerouting soon. He takes on c4, which gives the bishop that, you know, that pressure potentially on e4. If we look at this, so the bishop going here, so the knight can move, and this bishop can go there. So if we look at this, basically some rearrangement of pieces. The knight can move here, and now bishop c6, and this knight can also has options like knight g6. So it's a very neat idea to get the pieces on full power here. Both bishops are now sorted out. Okay, and from here also this queen c5 is quite powerful with this idea of playing knight h5 here then, if that's one of the main intentions. Difficult to evict the queen here on c5. It's quite an annoying square. So king h1, knight h5. White got that dark square bishop with knight f4. Black, so with this nasty knight, white is provoked to kick the knight, and in the same time weakening these light squares rather to his king. With this g3, it turns out to be a fatal weakening move in the variation which we've just witnessed. if you think about it. This bishop is striking straight down at the king anyway. It looks a bit dangerous. So anyway, knight d3. So perhaps looking at this in advance, that anything with bishop e6 doesn't work. White's actually threatening, here. Sorry, black's threatening knight takes f2, isn't he? Rook takes, and then maybe queen takes e3. That could be the threat if white doesn't do anything particularly great here. But yeah, he blundered with bishop takes e6, so it's a tricky position already, because the knight's actually attacking b2 as well, and then c3 is going to be a problem. So tricky position with this knight d3. You see black's position is very powerful here. So bishop e6, a bad combination, which backfires with this bishop takes e4. Okay, so that was one of Tal's games at the Olympiad. Let's have a look at another. So we're looking with the black perspective in the 1966 Havana Olympiad, and let's load up another. This one is against Hort, and Hort was a very, very strong player, of course, Vlastimil Hort. Okay, so knight f3 from Vlastimil Hort. CSR is the country code. If anyone's a country code guru, can you tell me what CSR is, so I don't say the wrong one? So knight f6, c4, c5, symmetrical English, knight c3, and Tal plays e6. After g3, prepares to challenge white's fianchetto bishop by playing b6. He's going to have a bishop on this diagonal to parry white's bishop. So bishop g2, bishop b7. Now white castles, and bishop e7. And white decides he doesn't mind an exchange on g2. He plays d4, knowing that the light square bishop's going to be exchanged off here. Czech Republic, okay, thank you, yeah, Czech Republic, CSR, okay. Oh, someone's saying Czechoslovakia. Okay, okay. Alright. CSR is the country code. Okay. So C takes d4. Knight takes d4. The light square bishops get exchanged off. And now Tal plays queen c8. Just going to recharge that diagonal, maybe, with a useful check at some point. Perhaps. Queen d3. No, for the moment, knight c6. And there's another implication of queen c8. This c4 might be a problem. You know, knight e5 attacking c4. So actually, white takes now on c6, and we have queen takes c6 check, e4. Black's got a seemingly solid position to work with here. Black castles, and now we see bishop d2. So is c4 a target here? Yes, rook a c8 targeting c4, provoking b3. And okay, rook fd8. So black's position is pretty neat and harmonious here, and maybe he's interested in playing d5 in the future. But for the moment, it seems d5. Okay, after queen f3 is being discouraged. a6, as though maybe, you know, b5 might be on the cards later, also to deprive the knight of the b5 square. Rook fe1, d6, playing it like a hedgehog, prickly hedgehog. Rook ac1, queen b7. So black is ready to pounce, maybe with b5 at the appropriate moment, or even d5 more radically. So queen e2. And now this move rook b8 looks as though b5 really, there's an interest in black in playing b5. White clamps this down now. So what do you guys think? Is this a good hedgehog or a bad hedgehog? That's the question. If I give you 20 seconds to evaluate the position, good or bad hedgehog? So the hedgehog is like this structure here. We've got a hedgehog with the queen. The bishop's been exchanged off. Dark square bishops on the board. White's classically weakening a lot of these dark squares in this structure. That's common. What do you reckon? But black has not got the pair of knights, only a single knight. Does that make a difference? Do you think this is good or bad? Who do you think is better, white or black? If I ask that here. 20 seconds to think about it. Okay. Seems balanced. Someone says bad, except it's Tal. Someone says okay on stream. Okay. Rook bc8 is played. Even. Gaga 1204. Okay, even. So nothing radical at the moment. Rook bc8. The rook moves back. This reverberation is not to be underestimated. When players seem to do nothing, often they're generating weaknesses because the opponent might lose patience or something. But here this seems a solid, useful move played by white. Bishop f4. What potential weakness does it create? Bishop f4, where it slightly loosens c3 support. And remember, these squares are already slightly weakened. Black plays now h6, which might give the option radically at some point of g5, but usually the idea is just make sure the back row is weak. The king's back row is not going to lead to a back row mate. Give the king some air. Now rook cd1 is played, which does weaken c3 again. So these two moves have actually both weakened c3. That knight is now a loose piece in this position. And I wonder if you think that is at all significant here. We've also got a slight tactical vulnerability here, haven't we, with the queen staring at the king in this position. Can you guess what Tal played here? So without looking at the score sheet, I hope you've got your opening book tab instead of notation tab on Play Chess. And what did Tal play here if I give you 15 seconds starting from now? Anyone? That's a liberating move based on the loose knight on c3. Tal played d5, and it doesn't immediately look obvious. Why is d5 possible? Because, you know, what about ed? And if you take, then you lose this bishop. Well, ed is played, but now the surprising follow-up, which is bishop b4, targeting the loose knight, getting out of the way of this, so d takes becomes possible without losing the bishop. White has to do something about this c3 knight, and we've still got this nasty pin now on this pawn against the king. So white plays bishop d2 here, and now e takes d5 is very possible. White tries to neutralize the diagonal with queen f3, and now Tal takes on c3 and plays knight e4. So there's a threat now of knight takes maybe, and d takes will be check. Bishop d2. And now a surprising move again, f5. So trying to get this queen off the diagonal, you know, if queen f5, maybe just taken and takes here with check. C takes d5 is played, and we see rook takes d5, and black's position has sprung to life quite well here. Bishop e3, very nice position for black. So that d5 liberation has shown great pieces now. Rook c3, pins have emerged that you wouldn't have dreamed existed now. This pin, this diagonal still loose. Okay, rook takes d5, queen takes d5, rook d1 trying to kick the queen away. The queen goes to e6, and of course look at it, b3. Look, this is nasty. So white tries check and goes for this pawn, rook f8. Tal blocks and basically protects the f pawn, and he's still got this threat on b3. White moves the b pawn now with b4, but these pawns are loose and we have this nasty pin now. So rook b3 going for that pawn, and white plays a5, but again a loose pawn is emerging here. Takes, and then rook a3, keeping the pin, and really he wants this pawn potentially. Rook a8 is played. Okay, rook a8. So what is happening here? Is this setting some sort of nasty trap? Tal in this game played knight d5 here. I wonder if rook takes a5, what could white do here? That's an interesting question to ask. Maybe it's slightly awkward for queen b7. I'm not entirely sure, unless anyone can see a really strong move for white. Maybe rook takes a5 was absolutely possible. Tal's choice actually goes for the king more with knight d5. So actually there's a nasty threat of knight takes e3, forcing that, and then maybe the second rank to the king's going to be useful. But there's another implication of knight d5 as well, which we're about to see. After rook f8 again, now can you see what Tal plays in this position, which looks quite crushing in many respects. What does Tal play here? If I give you 15 seconds starting from now. Okay, in this position, f4. So why is f4 strong? Well, obviously the bishop can't take the pin, and what if g takes, which wasn't in the game continuation? What would happen here? Would it be knight e3 or queen g6? Possibly, someone's saying rook e3. Is that possible? Let's have a look at knight e3. And what about the check here? Is this at all dangerous? It looks as though it might be. Queen c4. You need to guard against the check. So this will be quite menacing. And the queen's got to protect e4 for that diagonal as well. I think if queen d6 there, then there's queen queen e4. So I think that might be the continuation. If queen g6, there's queen g3, isn't there? Or maybe here actually knight takes e3 is pretty dangerous. Unless check here. This could be crushing, like this. So that's also dangerous. It's knight e3 here. If we go to the back row, then there's Queen B1. Sorry, okay, does someone see a much stronger continuation? Let's go with G takes F again. So, is there a much stronger continuation anyone can spot here? It seems both Queen G6 and Knight E3 are pretty handy. So, someone's saying Rook E3. Why would Rook E3 be that good? Takes. No. Okay. So Knight E3. Oh, pardon me. And then Rook E3. Okay. That's dangerous as well. Yes. Good one. That looks quite forcing as well, getting a tempo on the Queen. Very, very, very dangerous indeed. That looks absolutely crushing. If the Queen and Rook coordinating, I think that's going to be all over. Okay, so in the game we see that the very dangerous variations after f4. So white sacrificed the exchange with Rook takes f4. Tal took, thanks very much, exchange up. Takes on a5, why not? And just plays Queen d5 check here. And white resigned. So what we've just witnessed is, for a moment, Tal with the hedgehog. For a small moment, white plays two moves to weaken c3 and Tal pounced on it tactically. So all it took was two moves. Let's have a look. So white slightly weakened on this diagonal. So we have this hedgehog for a moment, and this reverberating rook, causes maybe some impatience to a lot of players. So it's useful that to consider, because a4 is creating weaknesses. h6, another patient move, a waiting move. And well, how does white react? A loose piece is generated, and believe it or not, that can be the basis of a very important combination. Just a loose knight on c3 here, just d5, and black's position springs to life. Who would have imagined all these pins, etc., a few moves later from this position? So bishop b4, and black's pieces just spring to life. If takes, sorry, as I mentioned, I think this is good for black. Yes, taking here will be check. So the queen's, I think, got to try and stay on that diagonal. And black's rooks are just blasting down the board here after rook c3. That's a great infiltration point, hitting the queenside pawns. And this looks as though now, black's really, look at that position, how it sprung to life, the transformation. And now we see this idea of knight d5 coming up for f4 to really break white's position now with f4, making use fully of that pin. So we see some crushing variations there, and then we saw the exchange up, clear cut. So let's have a look at another game. Okay. So the opponent here is Erling Christiansen. I'm just going to load it very shortly. I'm just sorting out PGN headers. Okay, I'm going to paste this one. Okay. So e4 from Erling, Norway. This was the Norway team, e4, Erling Christiansen, 1966. c5, Sicilian defense, knight f3, e6. Okay, so white plays the open Sicilian, a6, and bishop d3. We've had a Susan Polgar game recently in this variation, in the current Olympiad. So d6, white castles, knight f6, bishop e3. White seems to be doing okay. Interesting decision here not to play bishop e7 but to fianchetto the bishop, g6. You might think d6 is a bit vulnerable, but on the other hand there's d-file congestion here. Is d6 that vulnerable? Can black afford to do this? White goes for a Moxie bind, c4, bishop g7. Okay, knight c3, castles, h3, and now knight c6. Maybe this is a bit questionable, this next move. So knight takes c6 is played, and it gives black an extra pawn in the center. B takes c6, and you might think, well, why did white do that? And also this b file, isn't that going to be useful? Well, white's thinking maybe f4 is quite strong here, but Tal immediately uses that b file, rook b8, rook f2, okay, and now rook e8. So rook e8 is sort of prophylaxis against f5, because then e takes, and we're on the bishop, aren't we? So it's prophylaxis against white playing f5. I like these cool looking prophylactic rook moves. Kasparov had them against Karpov in some games with the Sicilian. You can see, and Kasparov himself has said his style was influenced by Alekhine, Tal, and some other players, but he did mention, I'm pretty sure Alekhine and Tal as two of his major influences for Kasparov as well. Look at this treatment of Sicilian. Queen f3, okay. Queen f3 is played. Now black plays d5. White plays a technical move. Maybe he spent some time looking at this high precision looking move, which you'd expect some sort of computer to find here. This move, bishop a7, what on earth does this do? The rook, okay, goes to b7 here, and then the bishop just goes now to c5. So maybe that's better. White has interrupted maybe bishop b7, possibly. Okay, d4, and it looks as though the pawn might be weak here. Knight e2, knight d7, hitting the bishop, protecting pawn with the bishop, but introducing a powerful tactical unleashment actually, because if white takes on d4 here, I think this fails to bishop takes, knight c5. Or does it? If the knight moves, we can take on d3, right? If the queen moves to e3, I wonder about rook d7 here. What can white do about these two pieces? If knight c6, rook takes d3, isn't black just winning material? Or I don't know, there's queen c5 here, it gets a bit messy. So let's go back. In this position, okay, that's not so clear cut, is it? So knight d7, white in the game played bishop d6. Let's try and work this out. Bishop takes d4. Was there something I've completely missed here, which is probably quite likely? Do we all agree bishop takes d4 is a good move here? There's nothing better than bishop takes d4, correct? e5, is that move? Not really sure about e5. Let's go with bishop d4 again. Knight takes d4. There is actually, no, knight e5 fails I think, because it takes and then on f7. So let's look at that again. Knight c5, queen e3. What about just knight takes d3 here? Just creating that pin. This looks good, because then we got c5 coming up. No? I think that might be it. That looks convincing enough to me. Anyone? Okay, I think that's it for white. He's losing a piece there. So that probably explains why, partly, I hope, bishop d6 was played. But now, you know, white's in trouble. Black takes on b2. And this pawn is a bit dislocating for white, isn't it? On d4. c5 now. Bishop f8. And now, immediately, there's a threat of knight takes c5, actually. It gets a bit hairy, actually. What about knight takes d4 here? If this had been played, knight takes d4 here, this rook's loose. I guess we can take and take on c5. And the queen's actually hitting the bishop. And it gets worse actually. If bishop takes, then we got knight takes d3 hitting the queen. So that would all fall to pieces for white. So okay, rook c1 was played. And we see now bishop takes d6, c takes d6, and this pawn is finally supported with c5. So we've got nice pawns here now, except you might think light square's a bit weak. Okay, not a big deal. Queen g3, bishop b7. The bishop's very nice now. So we've got potential coordination as well. e5, opening up the bishop. Nice huge bishop there. Rook takes a2. Bishop c4. Rook a4, as if these pawns need to be liberated. Is there an exchange sack coming? White plays f5, trying to break through to the king here. And it could be quite dangerous. But now here Tal plays the exchange sack. Rook takes c4. And he gets not just the pawn, but he's about to get another one. This e5 is now weak. Look at that. And then d6 will be weak. But for the moment, white has rook takes f5. Okay. These two pawns, can they be liberated? Can these two be mopped up? Bishop e4. Okay, e5 is about to drop here. White plays rook f1, and we see rook takes e5. With an immediate threat, actually, it seems of rook g5 coordinating like this. We see queen f4. Now queen e8 protecting f7. And okay, there's now also a threat of maybe bishop takes g2 for rook takes e2. And white decided in this position, this is a strange looking knight sack. Knight takes d4. Tal just took it. Okay, for this one, this looks dangerous. Okay, how do we get out of this? Just king g7. That was played. Rook c7. So there's an immediate threat now of rook takes d7 and queen e5. How is this dealt with? Does rook f5 hitting the queen? Queen moves back. And now it's possible just to play rook d5, protecting the pawn, and about to munch this one. This is protected, and now queen e6, which prepares a nasty strike at white's king after queen b4. Can you guess, with the queen away from the action, we've seen in many master games recently, once the queen goes away from the king, this queen is, you know, more dangerous here. Can you guess black's move here? Final move of the game, if I give you 15 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Yeah, it looks tempting, doesn't it, to play maybe rook g5. Actually, a weakness of the last move is queen takes d4 check, isn't it? That would be check. So Tal bypasses that little trap or something. He plays actually bishop takes g2. It's a highly destructive move. Bishop takes g2. And now, okay, this is running with check. Say check here. Well, there's two checks to explore in this position. There's queen e2 as well, but I think rook g5 is the right one. For example, okay, king h1 check, and then mating on g2. What else could white do here? King f3. There's queen e3 using that pawn splat. So that's already crushing bishop takes g2. Black's already got a knight and bishop for rook, so white threw in the tower here. White resigned after bishop takes g2. So that was quite a complex game from the Sicilian. But let's be cynical here about white's play. Let's go back and be cynical about white's play. You see, white played a move which I'm pretty sure is anti-positional. White played at some point knight takes c6. This really gives black extra central control and the b file. Okay, so but there's this kind of idea of an attack, but that's kind of discouraged. First with rook b8 and then with rook e8, discouraging f5. Okay, queen f3, and now this central strike d5, and it looks for a moment that d5 might be weakening some of these dark squares around the shop. So white tries now an operation based on dark squares, bishop a7 and then bishop c5, and it looks as though this move should be very risky, but what is the outcome? One outcome of d4 is if you know, the interruption on b2 here is evident. So knight e2. Okay, and then we saw this very interesting move, knight d7, and it looks as though the d file and the idea of rook d7 as a resource is coming in very strong now. Remember, b2 is still hanging now because that's been interrupted by d4. So it seems d4, black's grabbing the advantage. So let's just review that variation again. You know, bishop takes, not, you know, knight takes, knight c5, queen e3, knight takes d3. I think this is fairly clear cut, that this is a really nasty pin because of c5 coming up. So basically this b2 has been weakened here, with no protection. So white plays bishop d6, and Tal in this position takes that b2 pawn up, and it's nasty for white. It's nasty here, and is also you know, this structure can be undermined as it is immediately, and now it just gets worse. So bishop takes d6, c5 supporting the pawn, but also the bishop's got a fine diagonal. Okay, so white's getting a little bit desperate, maybe. Two pawns down as well. But this f5, he's trying to break through, you know, with a lot of resources here to Tal's king. But now the exchange sack comes. So already 2 pawns up, 6 pawns against, sorry, 4, 5, 6, 7 against the 5. 2 pawns up already. 3 pawns for the exchange, 2 pawns for the exchange. After this move, we saw the move rook f1, but if rook f4, actually there's either, I think rook e5 is playable here as well, in any case. interesting, I was just thinking knight e5, but no, forget knight e5 because there's rook c5. So rook e5 there in any case. In the game continuation, rook e5. So it's still many pawns for the exchange, and rook g5 potentially on the cards. Queen f4, the queen just protects, threatening bishop takes g2. And white gets desperate here. What if he doesn't sacrifice the knight? Say knight g3. Maybe just bishop d5 in this position. Bishop d5 is pretty strong looking, protecting f7. It just looks nasty. These pawns are ready to go basically, aren't they, through the centre? So this desperate knight sack, desperate looking knight sack rather. The threats don't seem to be that amazing. Two pieces for the rook. And Tal blasts at the king now. Final blast at the king with bishop takes g2. So white was just systematically kind of outplayed, and there was a tactic in there which really swung the position in black's favour. So should we go on to another game? So this will be against Edgar Walther. Tal black against Edgar Walther. Okay. So let's see, e4, c5, Sicilian defense again. Tal is good with the Sicilian defense. So knight f3, d6, d4. You can imagine Kasparov analysing, as well as other kind of games, Tal games in the Sicilian. C takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and knight c6. I think it's classical variation. Bishop g5. We see e6, queen d2. So white's got an aggressive setup against Tal. Bishop e7, white castles queen side, black just castles king side. f4. And now an immediate central counter with d5, and we get a kind of structure reminiscent as though it came out of a French defense here. White plays e5, and after knight d7 it looks a little bit like a French defense type position in some variations of the French defense. h4. Okay, knight b6, bishop e2, bishop d7. So knight b6 was useful just for bishop d7 for a quick, maybe c-file pressure, quick c-file pressure. Alternatively, it is looking at c4, so maybe a move like knight a5 at some point. At the moment, maybe knight d5 though. So g3, rook ac8, and white centralizes a rook with rook he1. So he might be thinking to support e5 and play for f5 here. We see a6, and now bishop f1. Rook c7, as though neatly just double rooks here at some point. Queen e3. Here Tal took on d4 and doubles the rooks. So there might be a threat potentially of an exchange set now with rook takes c3. Rook d2, and is the exchange sack on? Well, it's not needed to be played here actually. And also, of course, this knight's hanging here in this position. After that last move, that was unveiling queen takes b6. So Tal's next move, queen b4, he's protecting the knight and he's keeping the option of the exchange sack. But white white plays now knight d1. So are the problems over for white, or have they just started? Well, we see more intense pressure now on c2 with bishop a4. Okay, so we've got nice pressure. Bishop d3. Okay, bishop b5, And okay, it looks as though, hang on, if you can exchange off the light square bishops, this is going to be handy. And what about this b6 thing? What's going on here? Why isn't b6 hanging? This is an interesting question, because white actually played rook e2. Let's have a look at queen takes b6. There could be a queen sack here. Bishop takes d3. Queen takes. Rook takes. If rook b1, sorry, if king b1, that's mate. If rook takes here, rook takes. King b1. We got rook c4 check, haven't we? Sorry, I'm just looking at this now. Actually, believe it or not, this is quite crushing. It's good fun. You don't take the queen as mate here. Is that clear? Okay. So queen takes b6. Looks as though bishop takes d3 refutes it. Is that right? Bishop takes d3. Can anyone see a flaw in that? It looks very, very clear cut, forcing variation. Does anyone see a flaw in this? It looks extremely forced sequence. It's just winning, isn't it? Okay, so the knight can't be taken. So white, maybe horrified by that variation, plays rook e2. And then we see queen a4. Again, okay, he's leaving the knight hanging, but of course a2 looks far too dangerous to leave. White takes on b5 though, and now we see queen takes b5. Not going for the a2 pawn, but now that there's menacing threats like knight c4 potentially, or other stuff. Let's see, queen b3 keeps the queens on with queen a5. After a3, we see rook c4. And rook c4, what is it doing, rook c4? Is it supporting knight a4? Is it supporting knight d7 to c5? What is going on with rook c4? Or maybe just to treble with queen c5? We'll see. After rook d3, actually we get a trebling. Queen c5, rook c3, rook c7. And white takes off a pair of rooks, rook takes c4, but knight takes c4, and black's pieces are very nice, and white's are a bit passive. Queen b4, wanting the queens off. Queen c6, no, the queens will not come off. King b1. And now we see the attack stage 2, b5, and now it looks as though maybe, you know, a5 is going to be useful. Knight f2 and a5 is played. The classic peeling open of lines now, with a bit of a difference actually, as we're about to see. Not necessary to mate the white king here, when there's other tactical vulnerabilities which such a line opening can create. So the line opening is an asset for black to use in whatever way he wants. So a takes b4, a takes b4. And okay, of course queen takes b4 is out of the question, I think, because of rook b7. So forget queen takes b4. White tries knight d3. Now we have rook a7, and really with rook a7, Tal has introduced the idea of queen a8 with rook a1 mating. It's pretty dangerous. And we see that knight takes b4. Okay, and you might ask, hold on a sec, can't white do anything here after queen a8? White can run with the king? No, white can't run with the king, because that would still be mate. But white can play c3, surely c3. Well, as I say, the a file asset can be used whatever way black wants, doesn't have to mate necessarily. And let's see, I wonder if you guys can spot this. Well, I wonder if I'll take you there to the last move to make it a bit easier. So check. So there's no mate here, is there? But what does black play here, which is equally winning in this position? If I give you 15 seconds starting from now, black to play and win. Anyone? Black has a simple winning move here. Not rook a2. Oh, white's covering a2. Sorry, white's covering a2 with queen and knight. Ah, yeah. Someone's got it. Someone's got it. And play chess. Look at all these squares the rook covers. All these squares. Now on stream, there's 30 of you on stream, and no one said the winning move here. You got a blockage. There's a mental blockage, isn't there, about sacrificing a pawn around the king. This is unbelievable. Come on, guys, come on. Not knight b2, not knight a3. You're thinking about the king here when you can be looking for something else. Forcing moves? Forcing moves? Is that a good clue? What good forcing move does black have here? I don't believe this. Yes, finally, finally. Knight a5. It checkmates basically the queen. Forget about the king being checkmated. The queen, where's the queen going? There's no square for the queen. Wow, it's a simple win. Simple. Sorry. All right. Okay. Sorry. Maybe someone did say it and I missed it. Okay. So let's just review this game. Have I got another game to show? I think this might be the last game. Just quickly. I think next week we can look at the 1972 Olympiad with white. But let's just review this game in overview and summary. So, Sicilian defense. Bishop g5. So we see an early d5. It goes into what looks like some variation of the French defense with this pawn structure. So the way Tal played it was quite interesting, to say the least. It looks all very, very nice play from black to intensify it and use that c file. And then we had this episode with this offering of the knight sack, which is very clever because strategically, if you think about this, how does black forcefully otherwise exchange off this pair of bishops to try and weaken white's light squares? So this little positional tactical move gets rid of the light square bishops here, offering b6. So he gets rid of the light square bishops potentially. Oh, by the way, sorry, we didn't look at this variation. Queen takes b6 here, I think, is crunch time because of, forget queen a2. What about just bishop takes d3 here, and rook takes c2? That's crunch time. Yeah. Just a quick note on that. Okay, so bishop takes b5. Queen takes, and then okay, some probing. One pair of rooks came off. The attack continued. So this a file line opening, the tale of the unexpected. It doesn't have to be for the white king. It can be for the white queen to be trapped. And this is very nifty. This queen position for queen at a8. Okay, I hope you enjoyed these games. Next week I may have a look at Tal from 1972 Olympiad because I think it's quite ingenious, these games. Absolutely impressive stuff behind the scenes. So yeah, have a good week. See you next week. Okay, this will be uploaded on YouTube. Check it out later. Any comments or questions there, feel free on YouTube. Thanks very much.